So, in this session we are going to talk about another concept, that is known as organizational learning, and then we will see that how organizational learning is related to change. You remember before that we talked about innovation, that how innovation can be linked with the change. Now, when we are talking about innovation and the role of innovation in change, it is very important that we improve the capability of the people to innovate, and this capability of the people to innovate comes from the learning, and that is why we are going to focus in the next two sessions on how learning is going to be linked with the change. And we will start with organizational learning, which is a process, and then we move to the next part, that is outcome, which is known as learning organizations. So, the next two sessions, basically next 2 to 3 sessions, we will be talking about learning and its relationship with the change. So, with this preamble we proceed further to discuss that how organizational learning is going to related with change. So, when we are talking about organizational learning, we have to define it first, that what is organizational learning. Now, if you look at the definition, it says that organizational learning facilitates the development of new knowledge, help in acquiring new insights, which has the potential to influence the change. And this is related to again organizational performance, because any performance improvement effort is related to the change, and that is why we go for a change. So, when we are going for any kind of change in organization, maybe in a structure, process, system, it depends upon how well people have the capability, acquisition or intuition to take it and see that they are able to reach to the desired end state, that is the new paradigm or new setup or a new structure or new process. Now, organizational learning is going to help in this process, and that is what we are going to discuss here, that how organizational learning is going to help us in this process to ensure that it is going to be possible. Now, if you look at the role of learning, it is basically the learning by all the individuals in the organization, right. So, and that is why it is more collective. So, the learning could happen at 3 levels. It could be happening at the individual level, where people are going to learn certain things through training and development interventions. Now, in learning can also take place at the group level, where you are going to be learning certain things in the group. For example, you are going to learn something about how to work effectively in a team, and that is where certain interventions can be planned at the group level. Now, when we are talking about organizational learning, it is something different than the individual and the group learning. Now, in organizational learning, what actually happens, that we try to see that how everybody learns and what is the process through which they are able to develop the capacities among themselves, which is going to influence the process of the change. Now, if you look at the outcome of this organizational learning, so it results in knowledge, because learning needs some kind of knowledge, and this could be in form of certain explicit knowledge, or it could be tacit knowledge. So, the tacit knowledge is something that is located with the people in their minds, okay, and this tacit knowledge is something that is not explicit in the sense that it is not documented. While we are talking about explicit knowledge, there is something which is available in the form of rules, manuals, guidelines, databases, handbooks, and this explicit knowledge is also an outcome of the learning that has happened among the people in an organization. Similarly, people also learn a lot of things based on their insights, intuition, experiences, which could be part of their tacit knowledge. Now, this tacit knowledge is the most important thing, or you can say event, which takes place with the people, and this remains with the people unless this tacit knowledge is transformed into some form of explicit knowledge. Now, the idea is that most of the organizations where the learning is happening through different interventions, people develop both kind of knowledge, tacit knowledge, and it could be transformed into some form of explicit knowledge. Now, when we are talking about organizational learning, we also need to see that how it could be related with different type of learning, right. So, here we talk about one kind of learning which is known as single loop learning. There could be different kind of learning in fact. Now, you can see here single loop learning, double loop learning and triple loop learning. Now, if you look at single loop, double loop and triple loop learning, you can see here what is simple loop learning. We will explain it further. Now, when we are talking about single loop learning, what actually happens? Look at this. It is related to what? In a single loop, what happens? We try to find out what we learn in terms of goals, values, beliefs, concepts, which lead to actions, strategies and techniques. Means based on our knowledge, we do certain things which result in certain outcomes, consequences. So, action leads to learning, and this is what we call single loop learning. Okay. It is the most common form of learning. In most of the problem solving, this happens that you take certain actions based upon your knowledge and experience, and then certain outcome is achieved, right. But when we are talking about double loop learning, it is not only problem solving or it is not only results and outcomes, but how the feedback is coming from this to again this. So, the results and consequences is again related to the governing variables, your knowledge, skill and experience, the conceptual framework that you have developed based on your knowledge, skill and experience. So, this feedback help you to strengthen your strategies, you modify your strategies, make changes in your strategy and actions, which might result in better outcomes. So, let us see how these three forms of learning happens in organizational context. So, we start with single loop learning. In single loop learning, what happens? The values, norms, beliefs, which is going to govern knowledge, and based on that we are going to take certain actions, okay, and these actions lead to certain events and conditions. Okay. And if there is a mismatch, then we try to make some corrections over this place. It means we try to see that our actions and our knowledge, they are matching, or there is a better fit between our actions and our knowledge, because this knowledge is going to lead to certain actions and these actions lead to certain outcomes. Now, if you look at the definition, it means that you are able to detect error and then make corrections. For example, you find that your actions are not able to lead to desired outcome, then you try to make certain corrections based on your knowledge in your actions, which might lead to better outcome, right. So, in this case what happens? The errors are detected and you try to make corrections, right. So, if you look at firms, so what most of the organizations do, they try to make changes in the policies and goals based on their knowledge and experiences, right. So, this is what we call a single loop learning. So, based on the learning, firms try to make adjustments, corrections in their policies, goals and objectives which they want to achieve. Now, this is at the lowest level learning. This is not strategic, okay. This is adaptive. It means you try to adapt yourself depending upon the requirement, and then you see that the kind of knowledge and skill that you have, it is going to lead to certain actions which would result in certain desired outcomes. But if it does not happen, you make certain changes, or you try to go for some kind of adaptations, okay, so that it results in better outcomes for you based on your actions. Now, this single loop learning is something that is where you do not have any kind of feedback, so that it goes here and you are able to make certain corrections at this place, and that is why we have double loop learning. In double loop learning, it is not that you are going to make corrections only here, but if you look at it, this mismatch, where you are going to make corrections or make certain adjustments at this level, what you do, you try to make adjustments at this level also. You try to correct your knowledge and skill, norms and values. So, you try to modify this also, so that it leads to desired actions, right, and then it would result in certain outcomes that is desirable, right. So, this occurs when you are not going to have only detection in your errors, but also you try to modify your norms, procedures, policies, objectives, everything. So, this is what we call double loop learning, right. So, it involves a change in the knowledge base of the organization, so that firms develop specific competencies which is required by them to be effective and perform well. So, the moment we are talking about change in the organizational knowledge base, it depends upon the learning that happens among the individuals in an organization. So, based on this learning, people in organizations try to modify their knowledge base, which is going to help them to lead to certain desired actions, right. So, it is a next level of learning, it is not lower level learning just like in single loop learning, but it is a more higher level learning, right. So, this is what we call strategic learning also, because in this case organizations are able to learn what is required by them, right, and then they try to see that they are able to meet those objectives for which they have gone for a change, and also see to it that resources and actions are available to it for processing these objectives. It means that first they define the objectives which they want to pursue, and then they also see whether resources and actions are available, right. So, it is not only actions, but also resources, which is norms, values, beliefs, basically the governing knowledge, right. In single loop learning, only objectives, you pursue the objectives, so you make adjustments here, and here in double loop learning you also make adjustments over here. Moving to triple loop learning, if you look at this, it is something different. It is more cyclical in nature, right. So, if you look at this, see how it proceeds. First of all, you decide about the mission, strategic plan, okay, the goals and objectives that you want to achieve, then the resources that you have, right. This would lead to what? You also try to see that what is how you are going to measure performance, and it is based on your learning capability, right. Then based on this you are getting certain outcomes. So, this is action part and this is the results and consequences parts, measures and assess the results. Based on this, then again you try to modify it. So, it is more cyclical process. One important thing here in triple loop learning is that you also try to use feedback at every stage, at this stage, at this stage and at this stage, and this feedback comes from this. If you look at it, see how it is moving. Okay. So, it based on the measures and results, you try to redesign your programs, services, right. You try to improve your delivery, you try to deliver program and services which could be more important, more productive, more effective, right. So, if you look at triple loop learning, it means that you are not going to get feedback at this and this place, but based on the results again you try to improve this at the third level, and that is why performance feedback cycle is included in this process, right, and that is why we call it triple loop learning. But most of the organizations usually go for this double loop learning. They do not use this feedback, modify it and then again use it, but they only try to make some adjustments over here in the knowledge which might lead to desired actions. But if you look at this triple loop learning, what should happen actually, that based on this you also need to modify at this level also, and based on the feedback that you are getting in terms of outcomes, then you try to modify your actions and your this one, but the feedback is coming only if there is a mismatch and you find that knowledge does not lead to desired actions and then desired actions does not lead to desired outcomes, and that is why triple loop learning become more say meaningful in the sense that use of this performance feedback cycle is included in the process. Now, after discussing a different type of learning that happens in the context of the organization that we have just talked about, like single loop, double loop and triple loop learning, let us see what actually happens in learning loop. This is the cycle of learning and which could be linked with the change, right. This is the learning loop, right, which is related to see how it happens. and this is the action loop. So, it means that based on this action the learning happens. Right. Now, if you look at this, it is related to say reflection. Reflection leads to learning mechanisms, how you learn. This is based upon experimentation, and based on this you go for review and review your performance and see what happens. And this is a cyclical process that goes on, but with this experimentation you also try to say that whether you are able to meet the needs of and the requirements of the people and the organization or not, because this is the action loop. So, whether your learning which is based on reflection and experimentation is able to help you to bring about the required change which requires basically certain actions, so that you are able to bridge the gaps between what you call the current state and the desired end state, right. So, you try to see that what kind of activities that you are going to perform in order to match that, and for that first of all what you do in any change management program, you define the need, go for experimentation, see whether it is matching the requirement or not, and then identify the gap, and based on this you take certain actions which might lead to fulfilling these gaps, and this is based upon the learning loop. And that is why this learning loop that we have just talked about, like single loop, double loop and triple loop, could be useful to ensure that how this learning leads to certain actions which would be able to fulfill your requirements for the change, and how this learning could be used to ensure that your change needs are identified, matched and fulfilled. Now, moving further, if you look at this, what we do basically, that how learning could be related with the change. So, the first stage is the thinking stage, it is the beginning stage. So, what are the different kind of activities that you do? You go for diagnosing the change, you try to see whether it is possible or not, you go for brainstorming, you communicate your concerns with the top management to identify the problem, okay, and you have a steering group which is responsible for managing the change in the organization. So, this is the first part where you go for starting the process of bringing about a change in the organization. So, you need to ensure that whether these activities that is to be performed and the kind of learning that is required in terms of the capacity of the people which happens through learning and resulting in some kind of thinking is available to the people or not. So, this thinking might lead to these activities. Then moving to the second part, it means now once you have established the task force, you have communicated the concerns, brainstormed it that okay, what would be the desired end state, what kind of change you want to bring out. Okay. After doing all these activities, the next stage you try to address these issues by focusing on these things like task forces, training, looking at what kind of skills would be required, getting support from the top management as also the people, right. Then building coalitions among the people across verticals and horizontals, and then you go for testing it whether it is going to be successful or not. So, the idea here is that you try to build capabilities here, and that is where learning is going to be important. And then at the third stage actually you implement the change. It means you try to see that how the change happens. So, you go for change, you identify champions who are going to advocate for the change, see what are your proposals for the change, what kind of structure, team, reward, right. All these things would be required. This stage is basically related to the process which is called building and sustaining change. So, now you can see that how we are able to relate learning with the change at the different stages or different stages, you can say the beginning stage, the focus stage and ultimately at the doing stage, right. Now, moving further, when we are talking about learning and change, so we have to see that how it happens, what is the process. Okay. So, any kind of improvements that you want to bring through change management is possible only if people are capable enough. So, one thing that you need to ensure that your leaders and workforce has the capability to improve their change management efforts, right. And for that what they require? Relevant innovative and dynamic learning opportunities, because this is going to be related with any kind of improvement that change management is going to bring. So, if you really want to develop change management capabilities among the people, you need to ensure that their learning is relevant, it is dynamic, it means that keep on changing depending upon the requirement of the change, so that they can keep pace with the demands of the transformation. So, when you go for any kind of transformation or change in the organization, people keep on having relevant knowledge and skill base, so that they are able to improve the performance of the organizations through change management capabilities. So, change management capability is nothing else but the skills that is needed to bring about the change, and this skill comes from where? From the training and other interventions. So, or the learning you can say, and then you need to ensure that leaders and workforce have those capabilities to go for it. So, learning professionals have a very important role here, especially training and development professionals, to ensure that people are able to develop those capabilities, and that is where they need to train the change agents to ensure that they have those capabilities through which they are able to carry out any kind of change successfully, right. See, it is not related to talk about the processes of the change, but it is about what kind of organization they are looking forward to. Okay. So, what kind of change they are looking forward to, and whether they have those capabilities to bring about the change or not, and that is where we are trying to relate organizational learning with the change process. Moving further, we will also discuss about what are the different kind of elements of learning. So, when we are talking about organizational learning, it is an ongoing process, people keep on learning and organizations also learn. So, some of individual learning could be said to be what we call organizational learning. So, if every people in the organization learning, so and if you sum it up, it becomes the organizational learning, right. So, we are moving from individual learning to what we call an organizational learning, and organizations also continuously learn, try to improve their knowledge and skill base, which is nothing else but the sum of knowledge and skill base of all the individuals who are part of the organizations. And how this learning happens in the case of organization is improving the capabilities of the people, and this happens through getting new inputs. Okay. For example, any kind of change that happens in the organization, say into structure, technology or anything, is characterized by innovation. It means you must get certain inputs so that you can think about how to bring about a change, because if you want to bring about a change in the technology, say new technology or improved technology, and that is possible only through innovations. We are not thinking about restructuring organizations, but if you do not know what are the different kind of structure and what kind of structure would be appropriate, then it will be very difficult for you to design your organization, and that is where acquisition of new inputs are very, very important. Then retention of these inputs, the knowledge and skill base that is required by the people must be retained by them, okay, so that they are able to make use of that, they can implement those learnings for bringing about a change. And the third is stabilization and usage of newly acquired inputs. It means that the new learning that has happened with the people stays with them, it gets institutionalized, and so that they are able to make use of it for different processes of the organization. So, the idea here is that any kind of organizational learning is going to help you to improve the capabilities for change, right. And how we foster organizational learning, how we improve? By addressing the problems or issues, by identifying newer alternatives or other possible solutions. Organizations must be flexible enough, and they should be open for innovation, experimentation, because if they are flexible and open for experimentation, then it is going to provide you some advantage when it comes to learning, right. So, how organizations promote flexibility and experimentation? Using experts, because these experts are successful in their domain, are implementing change, right. Allowing or providing opportunities to employees to use their knowledge and skill base to solve problems, and that is based only when employees are using their problem solving abilities, and it is possible only if they have learned and have developed a creative mind. Then linking it with the reward. So, people who are using new approaches to solve the problem and get success must be linked with the reward. And finally, we need to review performance on a periodical basis to see that whether we are able to achieve objectives and experiences which was required through flexibility and experimentation. So, flexibility and experimentation provides you an avenue for learning. Okay. Then another way to look at it is that establishing temporary systems. Temporary systems means when you go for any kind of change, right, it involves certain decisions. Now, you are going to set up certain, say, change teams or tag teams or groups which is responsible for the change, and this is what we know as temporary systems. You need to ensure these temporary systems have people from different backgrounds. They could be cross functional teams from different departments, right. Similarly, they have a time bound objective. It means that the temporary system which is going to work on any kind of project related to change management, they need to achieve the desired change within a given time frame, right. And you also need to ensure that it is able to facilitate objective oriented approach. It means that this project management team, or what you call the temporary systems that have been developed, it is able to address the problems of different kind of problems which may be there related to change management, like how they are going to get involvement of the people, how they are going to ensure that people are not going to resist, how they are going to set get resources from the top management and commitment from the resources. So, they have to facilitate all these issues related to any kind of change management. Then they also encourage risk orientation and independent outlook to see that how we can solve issues related to the change management, any problem that might come up, which could be simple or complex. Then you also need to develop a flexible framework which can be created or dissolved depending upon the requirement. It means these temporary systems are going to be dissolved once the change management is implemented successfully, it gets institutionalized, because that is not required now. Moving further, we also have two kind of planning, a contingency plan and an incremental plan. Contingency plan, it depends whether organizations are prepared to bring about the change or not, right. So, when an incremental plan means continuously you prepare yourself to go for some kind of change, and that becomes a regular process in the organization, right. Now, when we are talking about whether it is whether we are going to have a contingency plan and incremental plan, it depends upon what kind of plan you have, whether it is contingent. Contingent means that your plan is prepared depending upon the requirement, right. Then this learning is going to help you that what kind of initiatives would be required with the process of practices of the change management. Then you also need to record the learning from the experiences that you get, so that you have it in some explicit form which could be used by others for the next kind of change or the next incremental change. And since you have created task forces, you try to identify what are the different approaches and solutions which could be used for implementing a change. So, you need to develop some kind of plan depending upon the requirement, or a regular plan which is known as incremental plan, to ensure that you are able to bring about change successfully, and then you have to see that how learning is going to help you in the process, right. So, this is related to contingency plan. Next is competency building, because this is very important. See, any kind of change management initiative depends upon the competency of the organization, and competency of the organization is nothing else but the collective learning of the people in an organization, right. So, this collective learning is nothing else but the competencies of the people in the organization, and these competencies of the people is an outcome of the learning that takes place within the organization through different activities, the job that they do, experiences that they share, intuitions that they have. So, based on this, the learning happens which is going to strengthen their competencies, and these competencies can be further strengthened when you invite experts or practitioners to share their experiences or best practices, and this will also help you to endorse changes that you want to bring about. Or you can also go for seminars, workshops, conferences where people are going to participate, okay, to acquire new skills and competencies, right. So, these are the ways through which competencies can be built among the members of the organization, and that is how they would be able to build up their competencies. And then creating task forces also for communicating shared goals, and then you also have especially in the change process, those who are involved, okay, they are supposed to communicate goals that okay, this is what we want to achieve, this is where we are, and this is our objective as per the requirements of the change management, but you also ensure that it is getting the approval and as per plan of the top management, so that you get the support and commitment of the top management also. So, we discussed about different mechanism for fostering learning like competency building, contingency plan, right, and other kind of initiatives that is required for fostering learning. So, now you can see that how an organization's learning capability improves, which results in better customer satisfaction or organizational performance, right. So, you need to identify your internal structure and processes. So, you need to identify facilitating factors, culture, support from the top management, structure, these could be facilitating factors, then learning modes, the culture and experience of the people. So, this is going to help you to develop the capability of the organizations, right. Capability means their learning capability, and if they are capable enough and they are able to build their competence, it would result in better customer satisfaction, organizational performance, and it would certainly lead to results and consequences what is known as a better sales growth or profitabilities. So, these are the indicators of performance. So, now you can see that how if you are able to build up organizational learning, it increases the capacity to the change in terms of better performance, and there could be other indicators that we could use for the organization to ensure that how it happens. Moving further, we have to identify what are the different kind of factors which facilitate learning. Okay. So, the three important factors that I would like to discuss here is supporting learning environment, right. So, you need to ensure that there is a supportive learning environment. It means that yes, you are able to provide safety, so that people are not anxious about it. There could be differences, so you need to appreciate differences. Similarly, you should be open to new ideas, and you allow people to reflect upon it, what is happening, right. Then concrete learning process and practices to ensure that when this organizational learning happens, it happens through experimentation, information collection, analysis, education, training, and information sharing. So, all these tools and techniques could be used, as I discussed earlier also, that there is a mechanism to foster organizational learning. So, these are the mechanisms through which you can foster organizational learning. Then you need to ensure that you have leadership which is going to be very supportive, right, and then the learning is to be reinforced. It means reinforced in the sense that if people are using this learning for better performance, they must be recognized and rewarded for that, right. So, you need to ensure that managers recognize this and encourage expression of multiple viewpoints. They provide time and resources for all these activities. So, what we have discussed earlier, basically in if you look at in some form, these are the three important points: supporting learning environment, creating learning processes, and leadership. These are the three important factors which is going to facilitate organizational learning. Now, moving further, why we go for it? So, the focus is on what? Innovation and change. As I told you earlier also, when I was talking about innovation and change, I told you that the objective of learning is to bring about an innovation which results in some kind of change for the organization, maybe in structure, product, technology, process, whatever it is, right. So, here the idea is that why you want to go for these kind of things, why you want to bring about a change in your product, services, processes, so that you can get some kind of competitive advantage, right. How? By adopting new ideas or behavior, and that is what we call innovation, right. Then and it could be in form of new product, new services and new technology that we have already talked about. So, either you go for incremental change or that you go for revolutionary changes, which is going to be more transformational radical change, where you go for quantum leaps, right. You bring about a different kind of technology altogether. I talk about a different kind of structure altogether. For example, suppose you are having a functional structure, now you want to move to a virtual organization, which would be a quantum leap for you, right. How you are going to do that is to be looked into, but basically the idea is that this learning helps you to innovate and bring about successful change in the product, process or technology, so that you are able to compete. That is one of the objectives of learning. Moving further, another objective would be going for continuous improvement in the product and processes, in services, everything. So, you try to improve your processes, you try to bring about improve about quality, and that is where the total quality movement comes in, where you are trying to see that how you are able to bring about quality in all aspects of organizational life, not only in products, but processes, people and all other activities. Then how are able to adapt and transform. So, through this continuous improvement you are able to bring about successful change in your processes, and that is what we call gradual evolution. This is related to what you call incremental changes. Okay. But the only weakness of this kind of approach is it has a creative insight, limited creative insight, means that since you are going for incremental changes, you do not look at long term goals and objectives, right. Then the focus is on knowledge management. Basically, this is one of the important aspect of organizational learning, because organizational learning helps you to build the knowledge, both explicit and knowledge, and these are the various stages through which knowledge management systems could be developed in the organization to ensure that how knowledge is acquired, disseminated along to the people, okay, how you refine the existing knowledge, how you create new knowledge, how you make use of knowledge, and for that you also need to have a knowledge management system in the organization, which could have an IT platform through which you are going to conduct all these activities related to knowledge management, right. So, now what we have seen that how organizational learning is going to facilitate innovation, continuous improvement and developing a knowledge management system, so that whatever learning has happened does not remain tacit only, but it becomes more explicit, which could be used by the people in the organization, right. So, thank you very much.